Tex Watson was this strange guy dressed all in black with 6 guns on his hips. And he was always strutting around the Spahn Ranch like this strange gunslinger.
Charles Tex Watson is an American murderer who was a central member of the Manson family. Even though the media shifted the blame entirely on Manson, there is enough evidence to believe that Watson was equally responsible legally and morally for at least 8 of the murders, all of which he served as one of the executioners. Charles Tex Watson was born in Dallas, Texas on December 2, 1945 and grew up in nearby Copeville. He was the youngest of 3 children. Watson grew up attending church locally and was an honor student, editor on the school paper, and captain of the football team, and set a record for the high hurdle at Farmersville High School. In September 1964, Watson moved to Denton, Texas to attend the University of North Texas, where he became a member of Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity.
Charles was above average, very definitely so. He was what I would call an all-round student. He excelled in football and basketball and track. He was well liked by the student body, by the rest of the student body. He seemed to mix well. He was well adjusted, and he was very active in all kinds of extracurricular activities, you see.
In January 1967, Watson began working at Braniff International as a baggage handler. Using free airline tickets to travel, he visited the fraternity brother in Los Angeles. There he became interested in the psychedelic and music lifestyle of the late 1960s. One day Watson picked up the Beach Boys member Dennis Wilson while he was hitchhiking and drove him to Wilson's house. There he was first introduced to Charles Manson and the family members who lived with Wilson at the time. In December 1968, Watson left the Manson family. He moved in with a woman who sold small quantities of marijuana and LSD to his friends and became her lover. The two lived a reasonably normal life in Hollywood for a few months, improving their illegal activity until Watson became restless and rejoined the family. Following Manson's order to find money for Helter Skelter, Watson contrived to steal money from his lover's friend, Bernard Crow. Crow called the ranch, spoke to Manson, and told him he would come to the ranch and kill everyone if he did not get his money back. In response, Manson shot Crow in the stomach using the same pistol that Watson would use in the Tate murder. Later in the early 80s, Crow and Watson encountered one another in the California Man's Colony, and following a long conversation about the past and religion, Crow forgave Watson for his role in the theft and the shooting. On August 9, 1969, as a member of the Manson family, Watson led Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel to the home of Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate. They murdered all 4 people inside the house and also Stephen Parent in the driveway. Watson and his crime partners inflicted 28 stab wounds to one victim, Abigail Folger. The following night, Manson and 6 others went to the home of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. Manson and Watson entered the home, and according to Watson's book, Will You Die For Me?, Manson held the occupant at gunpoint while Watson tied them up before the gang killed them.
Manson said, hey, I want you to go out and kill these people, to go up to this place and kill everyone that is there. And he gave us the orders, the directions, even though we knew where we were going. He gave us all the directions of what to do after we got there and what not to do, and told the girls to write something witchy on the walls. And here I was, a naive Texas boy, without a conscience of really right and wrong, thinking that the world was going to come to the end tomorrow. And going on this journey over to this house to kill whoever was in the house, not knowing how many people were there, who they were, what they looked like, whether they were men, women, didn't know anything about this. Going to this house very reluctantly. My conscience hadn't completely dwindled down to nothing at that time. But it was very close to it because I didn't have enough to say, hey, I'm not going to do this.
On October 2, 1969, Watson fled the Span Ranch and headed back to his native state of Texas. However, after almost 2 months, on November 30, 1969, he was arrested in Texas for the Tate LaBianca murders. He and his lawyer fought extradition to California for 9 months.
Well, it's been 10 months of hard work, Carl, and of course we're very happy he's on his way to California. That's where he should have been 8 months ago at the very minimum. When Justice Black handed down his decision this morning, he reaffirmed my faith in the federal judiciary, I'll say that. I think there's something wrong with the system that can take an alleged killer that slaughtered 5 people and hide them in the state of Texas for 10 months. It shocks my conscience, and I would hope that it would awaken people to the need of some law that would expedite things of this nature.
Upon arriving in California, he stopped talking and eating, losing 55 pounds. He was admitted to Atascadero State Hospital for a 90-day evaluation period to determine if he was fit to stand trial. He stayed there until February 1971, when he was deemed able to stand trial. Watson tried everything he could to not stand trial, but on October 12, 1971, Watson was convicted on 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. The 7 counts included the murders of Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, Stephen Parent, Sharon Tate Polonsky, who was 8 months pregnant, Jay Spring, Lino LaBianca, and Rosemary LaBianca.
I might say that I feel sorry for this man, that he chose this way of life and was choosing. There is no way of turning back. You cannot, or society cannot, and I'm not reading notes, they cannot trust you living next door to them. What mercy, sir, did you show my daughter when she was begging for her life? What mercy did you show my daughter when she says, give me 2 weeks to have my baby and then you can kill me? What mercy did you show her? In 21 years, I would like to have asked this prisoner why. He did not know my daughter. He had never seen her, but not that I know of. She'd only been home for 2 weeks. How can an individual, without knowing, without any abrasive feelings toward an individual, go in and slice them up, and this mother, 8.5 months pregnant? What about her family? What about her family? And what about the family that she was going to have, sir? Is that not a family? I saw how your feathers ruffled when you was talking about your family. What about my family? When will she come up for parole? When will I come up for parole? Can you tell me that? Are these 7 victims and possibly more going to walk out of their graves when you get paroled? Yes, I feel sorry for anyone that has chosen that way of life. But if you can tell me one person that wants to live next door to you with your children or with their children, I'll eat my hat.
1 week later, The same jury took only 2.5 hours to determine that he was sane, and on October 21, 1971, he was sentenced to death. He arrived on California's death row on November 17, 1971, but avoided execution when the California Supreme Court People v. Anderson decision resulted in the invalidation of all death sentences imposed in California prior to 1972. And that sentence was commuted to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Watson's minimum eligible parole date was on November 26, 1976. He has been denied parole 18 times since then, including 2 stipulations. He was most recently given a 5-year denial of parole at a board hearing in October 2021.
But the killers have publicly acknowledged both responsibility and remorse at dramatic parole board hearings like Tex Watson's.
I live with remorse day by day. I can't just come here today and show you that I'm a remorseful person or that I regret what I do. I live with it. It's part of my life. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what I've done, who I've hurt, the shame, the guilt that is constantly put towards me by everyone that I see. It's not something that I can hide from.
By his own description, Watson was the all-American boy. That was before Manson.
Jesus Christ is taking the foolish things of this world which he has chose.
In more recent years, Watson was born again. He is now the assistant to the prison chaplain. But at Watson's last parole hearing, Paul Tate was waiting, the father of Sharon Tate, whom Watson stabbed to death.
I am totally aware of everything as it sat, and it will always be etched in my mind. And that man should never, never, never be turned loose on society. He hasn't changed. He hasn't changed one iota.
Tex Watson was denied parole. His next hearing is 2 years away.
He's about the only prisoner that I know of that has almost a run of the prison. He has the use of the phone and the prison chapel under there. He has this business in town. He's been allowed to get married. He has 2 kids. As a matter of fact, at the last parole hearing, they were saying, well, we don't know if he takes us seriously here because he doesn't even consider himself a prisoner.
In 1979, while in prison, he married Christine Jones Figge. In 1980, through conjugal visits, which is a scheduled period in which an inmate is permitted to spend several hours or days in private with a visitor, they were able to have 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. Those visits for life prisoners were banned in October 1996. After 25 years of marriage, Figge divorced Watson after meeting another man in 2003. Figge and Watson remained friends. He had become an ordained minister in 1981 and received a BS in business management in 2009 from California Coast University, a distance learning college. Other than this, as of July 2023, he remains behind bars and has been in prison for 52 years in Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego, California.
When Watson turned himself in, when he was alerted in Texas, he was at his parents' house. They called the police called the local sheriff, who was Tex's cousin, and his parents, and said he's wanted for questioning in these unsolved Tate murders. This was November 29th. Nobody had been identified publicly as suspects. The police were just starting to figure out that these people had killed their victims. So 2 LAPD flew down to Texas. Watson was brought into the station, questioned by the LAPD, put under arrest. They had to extradite him, so the sheriff there, Tex's cousin, put him in a cell. The family called up a lawyer, Bill Boyd, who had actually represented Tex on a college case when he stole a typewriter from a college in a prank. Bill Boyd told me in an interview in 2008 that day he had Tex tell him the whole story, or Charles as he called him, about how he met Manson, why the murders were committed, how they happened. He said he spoke to me for 20 hours, and he goes, I've got all those audio tapes in a safe in my office. He told me this in 2008. He said he also described other murders that the family had committed that hadn't been connected to them.
I go down to the Collin County Jail. His uncle, Tom Montgomery, was the elected sheriff at the time. And so Sheriff Montgomery and Elizabeth Watson and her husband and Charles were all sitting in the sheriff's office. And I had met Charles before, and I said, well, what's going on here? And Tom said, well, these detectives from California called and told me to pick Charles up, told him that they were on their way and they want to talk to him. And I said, what do they want to talk to him about? And he said they wouldn't tell me. So I said, well, do they have a warrant? And he said, I called them back, and they said they would bring one with them. So I said, Charles, do you have any idea what they want to talk to you about? He said, no, I don't. And I said, well, if you could think of it, they're not going to be here another couple hours. It would sure help me to be prepared ahead of time, so I'll go back to my office. If you think of anything might be helpful, call me. About 30 minutes later, he called me to the office and says, could you come back over here? So I go back over there, and he said, I think I know what they want to talk to me about. And I said, what's that? And he said, you ever hear this actress Sharon Tate? I said, well, yeah. He said, well, I killed her.
Did you ask him why, or ask?
Well, we got into it a little bit. I interviewed him, and on audio tape, about 20 hours or so. Took him through all the details and everything, and those have never been published or released or anything. But he was, he's very candid, very open with me.
Did you ever transcribe those 20 hours of tapes?
No, unfortunately I didn't, and I kept them in a fireproof safe, and our firm's grown, and I'm in the process of trying to locate them.
Wow. Would there be any way, I know it's a big request, that you'd ever let me listen to them?
I would need his permission, I think. I remember the court-appointed lawyer kept contacting me and saying, "Would understand there's some tapes. Would you send those out?" As soon as I'd hang up from him, Charles would call. He said, "There's nothing in there that's going to help this guy. Don't send them." So he very jealously guarded them. And he told me about a bunch of other people Manson had killed, the Hell's Angels, people like that. That probably all came out at some time.
8 hours of interviews between Manson family killer Tex Watson and his former attorney Bill Boyd have been locked away for decades in Boyd's Texas safe. Now with Boyd dead and his estate in bankruptcy, those audio recordings are part of bankruptcy proceedings.
And in those 8 hours, Watson is talking to his attorney, and we don't know what's on those tapes. It's a big question mark for us. So we're anxious to get a hold of him to see if there's any information about any unsolved cases. Unfortunately, Tex Watson's attorney put in or notified the judge that he wanted to have some more time before they did that to put in some kind of paperwork to try and block that. So we got a 14-day stay.